Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's New Year edition of the Brain Balance Parents Know webinar. I'm here with Dr. Rebecca Jackson, and my name is Victoria Jacobetti. I am our brand manager at Brain Balance. I worked here for a really long time. I'm usually behind the scenes in these webinars, and today I'm going to interview Dr. Jackson. And I'm really excited for this conversation where we're going to just dive deep into what can families do for themselves as adults, as parents. What can you do for kids? What can we do for teens to maximize brain health and happiness this year? And, why is that important? This is something that's an exciting conversation for Rebecca and I, because I think in our friendship and long working relationship, this is something that we have bonded over for years. This is a lifestyle that we're going to talk about today that Rebecca and I really kind of walk the walk and are very passionate about together. So it should be a very, hopefully, interesting conversation for all of you. You have some great key takeaways and things that you can do with your family. There is a questions box, and we will be taking questions at the end for about 10 minutes, time permitted. So if you want to type in your questions, I can go through them at the end. And now we're going to get started. And I'm going to introduce Rebecca Jackson this time, which is very exciting. So welcome, Dr. Rebecca Jackson. Dr. Jackson comes to the role of Chief Programs Officer as an industry authority on the topics of development, cognition, and brain health. She holds a board certification as a cognitive specialist and has published peer-reviewed research on attention, emotional well-being, cognition, and development. Dr. Jackson is the author of the book, Back on Track, a practical guide to help kids of all ages thrive. She has been interviewed on The Doctor Show, NBC Nightly News, news outlets nationwide. She's been featured in Good Housekeeping, Forbes, Business Insider, working with both kids and adults. So now I want to welcome Dr. Jackson. Good afternoon.
Hi, it's fun to be here and reversing roles. So thanks for joining. As you mentioned, this is one of my favorite topics. So excited to share those actionable tips and strategies for families here today.
That's awesome. Thank you. So why don't we just get started with talking about something that might sound kind of out of reach or difficult to understand, that a term that's used very widely now, didn't used to be, but what is brain health?
Brain health is literally just simply the state of your brain. And what's interesting is brain health is something that we've thought about and talked about for a long time with our aging population. We really start to think about it when we start to notice a shift in decline in parents or grandparents or loved ones, when you see changes in their memory. But the reality is brain health starts at day one, and it impacts the quality of our life throughout our entire lifespan. So I always think about brain health in terms of, I want to ensure that the quality of my life matches the span of my life. So I want my brain health and lifespan to align and be optimized at every age and stage. So our brain health impacts our ability to pay attention, block out distractions. It impacts our mood, our productivity, and our energy. So brain health truly is everything. So it does include mental health, but brain health is more than just our mental health. It's our state of being.
So given all of that information, I kind of want to start off by saying, like, why should we care? And why should we care about choices and lifestyle and basically like a daily effort to impact our brain health?
I always think about this in terms of, what do we want to educate and teach our kids so that they can carry this with them throughout life? And in a world where there's so little that we can control, we do have the ability to impact and influence how we feel and function. We have the ability to impact our brain health. And so being aware of brain health, being mindful of when I'm in a good mood, when I'm in a bad mood, what is my brain communicating to me? And then what can I do about that information? So our brain health is dictated by genetics. I can't control my parents or the genes I was born with. It's impacted by our environment. Are we living in a safe, secure environment? Are there toxins? There's elements of that we can control and elements of our environment that we don't have direct control over. But then brain health is also dictated by our daily experiences and stimulation. And so those are the elements that we have an opportunity to influence or impact. And what we know when we look at brain health across the lifespan, we know that 80% of chronic disease comes from factors that we can change or influence. It comes from our daily lifestyle choices. So when we think about the amount of sleep we're getting and our ability to regulate and manage stress, the foods we're eating and putting in our body, the exercise we get, those are all pieces that not only impact our body's health over lifespan, but it also impacts mood, productivity today as well as in the long run. And it's hard to, I've got teenagers. It's hard to talk to teenagers to say, hey, these choices today are going to impact you when they're 80. They're not thinking about life at 80. They're thinking about, I've got a test tomorrow. I want to hang out with my friends tonight and I've got too much to do. So how can we put this conversation in the context that is real and relevant right now, that sets us up for success in the moment, as well as success down the road when we are going to care about it when we're 80.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit deeper. Like, you're saying something that I think is super important for just a message for just literally every human being, which is that there's your circumstance, there's your genetics, and then there's something that you can make a daily impact on. And why don't we talk a little bit about like what is really the breakdown of the impact that you can make or that you actually have control over in your life?
I think there's more there than what we often give ourselves credit for. One of the things that I'm constantly trying to communicate to my kids is our brain and body is constantly communicating with us if we pay attention. Our body is always showing us and telling us what we need. And there's the saying that all behavior is a form of communication, and that's true. And we pay attention to those cues and signals when our kids are little, right? You've got little ones. So when you've got a 3-year-old that's melting down right before dinner, you're thinking, Avery didn't get her nap. We've gone too long without a snack or food. Her brain and body are in a negative state because she doesn't have the resources she needs in that moment. So it gets communicated through her behavior. That communication still happens. It just looks different at different ages. And so I do this with myself and I try to communicate it with my kids. But if I wake up in the morning and I'm in a bad mood, our brain is negative when it doesn't have the resources it needs to meet the demands. So if I don't feel equipped to meet my expectations for that day, my brain's automatically going to go negative. And so then I've got to stop and ask myself, am I tired? Am I hungry? So what can I control? I maybe can't control the workload that's due tomorrow, but I can control how I feel in that moment. And so can I take half hour and go for a run? And if I don't have a half hour to go for a run, can I grab a jump rope and jump rope for 5 minutes or do some jump squats? Some piece of exercise can help me reset my mood and energy. So for me, I want my kids to be aware of how they feel and function and then what they can do to influence it in that moment. So, and I always, when I'm trying to bring awareness to my kids, it's always two things. Here's what I see, and so I want to give an observation of what I'm noticing about their mood or so I'm going to give an example from last night. My son Drew, he's got a lot going on right now. He's a travel hockey player. They've got finals this week. He's also taking driver's ed, and that's all happening this week at the same time. Drew was really crabby last night. And so I could say, I see that you look exhausted and you're sounding really frustrated. What can we do right now? And he was feeling really overwhelmed with the workload that he had last night. I can't change that he had a test tomorrow, but I could take some things off his plate. And so, I was able to say, well, how about if I help with X, Y, and Z when we get home? So you don't need to deal with that right now. So you've got more time to focus. And why don't you take a few minutes to exercise? He had just been in the car. He was sitting all day at school, and then he was in the car for a long time. He got stuck in traffic. So to help reset his mood and mind and energy, he needed a snack, he needed a burst of energy, and then he needed to feel like he was in control of that load. So those are just a couple examples of trying to be mindful of when our brain and body are giving us clues and cues, what can I do to influence that in the moment?
Right, and it's such an interesting concept that I think, is being more widely talked about now than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Just this concept that and something that we talk about at Brain Balance a lot, which is that the brain can change and that we can make small choices daily to impact how we feel and how we're functioning, not just that day, the next day, and also, as we said, for our long-term brain health. What are the, oh, go ahead.
I was to say something that has always really resonated me and makes me excited is so often, let's say you're a parent and you're facing challenges with your child. Maybe we're getting super disruptive behaviors in the classroom and you're getting phone calls all the time and you can't make it through family dinner without meltdowns, and you're trying to figure out what's the path forward here. What can I do to help my child? What can I do to create a better environment? And oftentimes the first line of defense that I don't want to say first line of defense, but oftentimes medication is an option. And we know that medication has an impact on the brain and it can change some symptoms. But what's so empowering and exciting to me is to learn there are so many different ways to impact the brain and how we feel and function. Medication is one way to impact the brain, but what we eat, our exercise, and our development is one of the primary drivers that sets us up for success in meeting the demands of life. And so if I've got a 10-year-old that can't meet 10-year-old classroom expectations and 10-year-old chores and expectations, then I've got the opportunity to enhance that development so that 10-year-old has the opportunity to be successful with those demands. And so that's always a piece to me that's exciting, is absolutely medication is one path forward in being able to impact the brain, but there are other ways. And so really making sure that parents are equipped with that knowledge of what are other tools that we can add to the arsenal of what you're already doing to support your kids and yourself to impact how you feel and function, those outcomes.
So what are those main categories then of the areas that we should, as families, if we're trying to focus on brain health as part of our goals for the year, what are the areas that we should think about impacting in small steps daily?
Yeah. So if we think about this, the World Health Organization did a great position paper 2 years ago, really digging into defining the concept of brain health and how it impacts us across the lifespan. And that position paper talks about it in terms of what are the detriments of brain health? What are the things that chip away at our mood, our abilities, and our function? So detriments to brain health include sleep. If we're not getting enough sleep, the brain cannot function optimally. And again, we see it really clearly in our toddlers and our little ones, but we forget that it applies to us as adults, as teenagers, as older kids as well. So lack of sleep makes everything harder. How we fuel our body. Nutrition is what makes our brain and body go, and the quality of that fuel. So not all food is created equal. So if you don't have enough food, or if you're eating highly processed foods or foods with a lot of added sugars, it's going to drive up systemic inflammation, and systemic inflammation can block good, healthy function. So you can have an amazing brain, but if that amazing brain is filled with inflammation, it's now going to be a cloudy, groggy experience. And so that inflammation just has a negative impact on things. Another detriment to brain health is stress. Is if we're worried, stress is really extremely fatiguing on the brain. So you kind of always have this background thought going in the back of your head of whatever it is that you're worried about. So then that's using brain resources and energy that's dedicated to worrying about the stress rather than dedicated to what it is that you're working on. So stress management becomes really important. Disease and pathology. So in illness, whether it's, even if you're sick for a few days with the flu, that can impact how you feel and function over those couple days. And then larger conditions, so things like ADHD, as well as then aging conditions, those are all things that impact. But to me, the thing that's, I think, really important to brain health that doesn't get talked about often enough is development. To me, development is one of the key detriments of brain health. And we do know that individuals that have ADHD or struggle with anxiety are going to have a higher likelihood of experiencing brain decline down the road. And again, right now, we're typically as parents, we're focused on getting through the day, getting through the moment. We're not worried about what is life going to look like, 40, 50 years from now. But in order to, we want to maximize development as much as we possibly can so that we get to live at that optimal state for as long as we can, because over time, with stress, with fatigue, with life and aging, there is going to be decline. And so, and we think about development as only impacting kids, but my skills and ability as an adult, my ability to read and comprehend and organize and execute, my abilities today as a 48-year-old are based on my childhood development. Now, the good news is the brain can constantly change, and actually research shows that peak executive functions happen in our 40s, which is such a great example that does continue to change and evolve and improve. So it's never too late. But I think that development is not talked about enough in optimizing brain health. So those are kind of the key detriments of brain health. And these are all pieces that we have the opportunity to impact and influence. We can work on getting enough sleep. We can work on stress management tools and resources. We can work on improving brain healthy nutrition. And we can absolutely work on optimizing development so that we're improving that brain state across our lifespan.
Okay, so let's really just dive into these and talk about them from the perspective of, what is optimal and what are some small steps that families can make this year to kind of take these, categorize them, work on them, and hopefully, just help take this overall stance with the family that these are areas that are very important to us this year because we're all going to feel better and function our best.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said is as a family. Let's approach this as a family. All of us have a brain. All of us could stand to optimize and improve our brain function. We all want to feel better, function better, be in better mood. So this is what we're choosing to prioritize as a family. I think sleep is a great place to start. And we need different amounts of sleep at different ages and stages in our life. I know for me, I do not do well on less than 8 hours of sleep at night. Our kids need more than that. So our teenagers still need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. And that's hard to get. I know for me, my kids, they leave for school at 6:45 in the morning. And so they get up really early, which means they cannot be staying up late. And so what can we do to structure our day to ensure help and success there? And yeah, you can catch up on the weekend, but sleep doesn't really work in that catch up way. So what can we do as a family? So do I need to shift dinner earlier? If we're coming home from hockey practice, can I have something that's already ready to go waiting so that I'm not having to prep a meal for 45 minutes once we get home? And just setting a goal of, hey, as a family, we're going to try to get to bed between 10 and 10:30. So how much time do you need to shower? How much time? Let's back it up and put a schedule. And it's so fun to watch the kids as they get older. My daughter last year, her sophomore year of high school, fought us tooth and nail on it. She was staying up way too late. She started the school year this year by saying, Mom, I really need to get more sleep this year. It didn't work last year. And I'm like, I know, I told you so. But it's a fun moment when they start to realize the impact. For you, with the kids younger, those kids will go through phases where they're pushing back on nap time. That's often a phase. If you push through it, they often will settle back into naps. But it's really, taking a look at what is the age and developmental ability of your child, and then look at the amount of sleep that's needed so that you can be matching and meeting those needs. You cannot have high expectations on lack of sleep. You're just not setting your child up for success and meeting those expectations.
Yeah, we actually have a great blog, just to plug one of my blogs, but we have a great blog about sleep expectations by age. And, I think that this is one of those things that no matter what age your kids are, as a parent, it's a constant battle, I assume. Just to tell the audience, Rebecca and I are kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum with our kids' ages. She has teenagers and I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So it's like, just approaching every single day and every single night is all about whether or not they're going to sleep. Are they going to sleep? Are they going to fall asleep on time? And I think that I've read and I've read and I've read and I've read that one of the number one things you can do for your child's development is ensure that they, and I've read the research, ensure they have enough sleep, ensure they have the proper amount of sleep. And sometimes there's exceptions to that, like, you were at a Christmas Eve party, or, you had a late night because of something once a week, but making sure that we hit that bedtime on time and we don't hit that overtired state, and that even when there's pushback to kind of power through that, I'm always relying on my mind, because it's very hard as a parent to always be pushing back about the same topic every single night of your life, right? I mean, I'm only 4 years into this, and that's a lot. But reading that research has really helped me solidify this, and also helped me talk to my husband about, no, this is very important. And I know if I can get over this 5-minute hump, 10-minute hump, 15-minute hump, like, and they get the proper amount of sleep, then everybody's life is easier. My life's easier tomorrow, your life's easier tomorrow, the kid's life is easier tomorrow. And another thing that came up recently with one of our coworkers, Jen, is she said that the other night she said to her kids, I just thought this was so gold, that she just said, you're going to sleep because I need to go to sleep, because now I have new priorities for the year and I'm getting up earlier. So, mommy's sleeping earlier. And I just thought to myself, that I never talk like that. I never say, my children sleep, right? For me, sometimes it could come, and I think as moms, it could come as my children sleep, my husband sleep, which is very important to me, because, who wants a crabby husband? And then, and my sleep kind of can go down that way if everybody else is having a hard time or there's other priorities. And so I thought maybe we could just talk through something that, I think of you as a person in my life who really finds these small moments to prioritize herself. And I know that you might say, not all the time, but, can we talk through, what is really important as women, that we have that extra sleep?
Yeah, I was just reading a study the other day that women on average get an hour less quality sleep at night than men, and that's regardless of what time you go to bed. This is a difference in our brains and genetics. And so even if we're in bed the same amount of time, we get up to an hour less of deep sleep every night. And then, you know, for so many of us, I think we carry the weight of our families on our shoulders. We're thinking about, if you work outside the home, you're thinking about juggling all of those responsibilities and priorities. You've got all of the kids' activities and tasks and things that are coming up, things that are due. Am I needing to bring something to school for a party, or like, it's the weight of the world as we're juggling all these things. And we do often as moms put everybody's needs in front of ours to ensure that everybody has what they need to be successful, and that can chip away at our needs. And then we can go through phases and times in our lives where sleep is harder based on hormones or health. So just some simple daily hygiene things are good for everybody, but I think especially important as females is ensuring that we're getting a little bit of exercise during the day. Physical activity that accelerates the heart rate helps to improve quality of sleep at night. Getting technology away from the hour before bedtime. We need our brain to be able to shut down. When I do this to myself, every once in a while I'll crawl into bed with my laptop. It is the worst thing because it changes my quality of sleep. I have a hard time. I normally fall asleep in very fast. And if I'm working right up until bedtime, it takes me 4 times longer to fall asleep because my brain is still in go mode and it doesn't click over into now that's time to relax. Making sure that we've got total darkness. Our hormones in our body are set off from light. And so the cycling of light can impact what's signaling to our brain to be awake, alert, and engaged, and what's signaling to our brain to rest and recover and sleep. And so getting that technology time, that screen time out of the hour before bedtime, that's because of light as well as what you're doing to engage your brain. And then total darkness. And then being consistent with those bedtime and wake up times. And these things are true for all of us, for kids, for adults, for teens. It is what the brain needs for optimal sleep. And we forget that, the processes that happen when we sleep, that's when memories are consolidated and stored. That's where recovery happens. And so there's a lot of biological and emotional and memory things that happen in our sleep that contribute to cognition and memory. And that's, again, one of the things that I try to talk to my kids about is staying up late to study is actually counterintuitive. So you've got to consolidate your study time and then get enough quality sleep so you can retrieve the information that you need the next day. If you're low on sleep, you're going to be low on memory. And so that's going to work against you.
Yeah, and I think for families going into this year, and we have this written a couple different ways on our website, but just trying to set small goals for change. If bedtime is a tough time for everyone in the family. So I think, as I said earlier, I think when you're having an issue with your kids and there is pushback or bedtime routine is always difficult, then it's going to be a trickle back effect to everyone, whether you have kids or not. So trying to set small goals rather than big leaps would probably be my first place that I would start. And we write a lot about this in our blogs, in the Brain Balance blog, but trying to pick off 10 minutes, 15 maybe max to start with and make slow gains is something that's proven to be pretty effective, rather than saying, for your 12-year-old, they're going to bed at 10 and I want them to go to bed at 9. So tomorrow we're going to start with 9 o'clock. Doesn't really seem to work because the body is used to going to bed at a certain time and waking up at a certain time, as Rebecca just said. So I think that might be a nice place to start for families this year if you're thinking about, I want to prioritize of this list for things that can impact brain health, sleep for the family this year, starting with tiny increments and being purposeful and trying to push it back slightly might be a great place to start. So another thing that you mentioned is exercise. Could be exercise, we could say movement. And why don't we talk first about, how does exercise and movement affect the brain? And then, what are ways that we can integrate exercise into our routines, not just for us, for our children, and what times of day, what types will really help us impact our focus, impact our mood, impact, our ability to handle stress long term.
It cannot emphasize enough the correlation between exercise and brain health. Exercise and movement is a key driver of development. And so the more we have complex coordinated movements and accelerate our heart rate, the better it is for our brain in the short term as well as in the long term. And it's so interesting to me when we think about aging and cognition, we understand, I feel like it's pretty widely known and accepted at this point, the importance to maintain balance and to exercise and to maintain muscle mass as we're aging. But we forget that doesn't start as a need when we're 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. That starts as a need at day one. So one of my favorite things when I was learning different things about the brain and learning about the muscles is understanding the correlation between the engagement of our muscles and the engagement of our brain. I give this example all the time, but when we sleep, we're laying down, so we're no longer engaging our muscles. That's what allows our brain to turn off enough to sleep. So our environment hasn't changed because we're awake or asleep, but how we perceive our environment has changed when we're no longer using our muscles. So I still have that sensory input of the weight of the blankets and the dog barking outside and the dark room. That's all still there. But when I stop using my muscles, it signals to my brain that it's okay to stop. And that's allowing my brain to rest. So it's not taking in and processing all of that sensory input. And then when our alarm goes off first thing in the morning, the very first thing that we do is we stretch. And we stretch because we're firing a muscle to fire input into the brain. So the more I engage my muscles, the more I'm signaling to my brain it's time to be awake, alert, and engaged. That's why the saying in school is sit up to pay attention. It's true. When I engage my core muscles, I increase my alertness. So one of the things that I annoy my kids with at home all the time is we always say we use our muscles to turn on our brain. And so if you've got to sit down and study, if you've got to write a paper, if you're feeling sluggish, you use your muscles first. I use it at work when I hit a stuck point and my brain, I can't come up with a solution, or I'm stuck in writing something, to just take a couple minutes to put down the pen, step away from the computer, and just go move a little bit. That's going to help to wake up my brain. So there's that alertness. We use our muscles to engage our brain. It also, when we exercise, it boosts memory and attention. And so when I spend even just a few minutes, even just a couple minutes spiking and elevating my heart rate, it is increasing my attention. And because my attention is increased, it's also then going to activate and enhance my memory. Another interesting thing about exercise is when we contract a muscle, hormones are released. So there are positive chemicals and hormones released that support brain functions through exercise. But beyond, there's the cardiovascular benefits, there's the brain health benefits, there's supporting energy and memory. But then there's also, when we look at the impact of movement on development, if we think about an infant and how an infant develops, the very first thing that happens with an infant is they learn to lift up their head. So in that early infant development, they're developing core muscles. And so the baby's head weighs about half as the total amount of the body. And so that's a big head to learn how to lift up and control and coordinate. So first they develop those core muscles. Then an infant starts to develop the lateral muscles. So when they start to roll and then eventually crawl, they're getting those muscles and those limbs to work together. So first we need to develop the core, then we need to coordinate body movements, and all of that happens before we start coordinating complex cognitive function, like thoughts and words and actions. And it's so easy to focus on what you see, to say, gosh, my child, I know they're so bright, they can tell me all about what it is that they read, but when they write it down, it just doesn't come out right. And then we jump to practicing that thing that is causing challenge or disruption, rather than backing it up to say, why did that not come together? And so to me, it's always backing it up to the earliest point of challenge, filling in the gaps and holes and moving forward from there. And so it's not about jumping to practicing the academics or practicing the higher cognitive function. We can use physical body movements and physical coordination to build networks and connections in the brain and to synchronize and mature functions. And when we do that, when our body is able to move in more complex, coordinated ways with better endurance and better control, that has an impact on our cognitive abilities as well. And so keeping the kids physically active and finding that balance between screen time and movement, because the more time they're on screens, the less time they're doing complex coordinated movements. And then making sure that it's not just, it's great to go for a run, but it's also good to do those complex coordinated movements. And so, whether they're doing, a dance class or a martial arts class, or there's so many different ways and activities to work those complex coordinated movements. That's one of the single best things that you can do for development. And then also doing movements that require timing. First, we learn how to do a skill or function, then we learn how to control that skill or function as we refine it, and those networks and pathways become stronger, faster, more efficient. So when we're doing activities that require timing, that requires the body to control it, to stop movement, to stop action, and to coordinate multiple things working together. And timing activities can be as simple as dribbling a basketball. If you're off in your rhythm and timing, you're going to lose control of dribbling the basketball. Or horseback riding, where you've got to sync your movement with the horse's movement. Hula hoop, that's, for a couple dollars at the store, you can get a hula hoop, and that's requiring timing. Swimming is another piece that requires complex coordinated movements and timing. So those are simple things that we can find ways to work into our everyday life that benefits our physical health and wellness, as well as our brain health and wellness, while supporting and optimizing the development that's going to lead to those higher level brain functions that we want for our kids and adults. We want the ability to pay attention and block out distractions, and to plan and organize or do the homework and remember to turn it in.
So let's say your child comes home from school And if you're like me, it's been very, very cold and snowy, so the kids aren't going outside at recess. And you have to get homework done, but they're seeming very tired, very cranky. And you had to make a choice between, should I let them rest? Should I let them go watch TV, unwind, or should I let them rest with a book or just lie down? Or knowing we have to do homework, should they do exercise? Which one of those two would you choose?
Yeah, none of the above. I'm going to start with food. I'm always going to plug protein in first, and then I'm going to give it 20 minutes to kick in. So I want to start by fueling their body. They have just come from a long day at school, and school is a lot. It is tons of sensory stimulation. They're having to think, they're having to hold still when they don't want to hold still. School is exhausting. And so making sure that we give them a chance to regroup after that is important. And I'm going to regroup with protein and carbohydrates. So I want to give them, not a sugary snack, because that's going to work against us when we get to the homework side of things. So I'm going to give them, make sure we get some food in there. So peanut butter and banana is a popular thing at my house currently. And usually the banana gets left out, like half cut up all over the place. That's another conversation. But a snack that has protein and carbohydrates to fill them up. And then downtime is important, but what I want to stress is, while it can feel like vegging out when we're on our screens or on TV, it still is fatiguing to the brain. It's still having to process and take in all of that visual and auditory stimulation and input. So if you want your child in a good mood and able to tap into attention, focus, decision-making, good behaviors, putting them on a device, technology is not the ideal way for them to recoup. And so have a snack, go chill out in your room for 20 minutes, go take some time to yourself. And then, depending on their mood and energy level, I'm going to put physical in before the homework. So even if the physical is just quick, hey, it's been a while since you've had your rollerblades out. Why don't you go rollerblade the driveway for a little bit, or go hop on your bike, go see if they finished painting the house up the block. I'm curious, some movement. And I don't want to put movement in as you've got to go exercise before you do this. We want kids to start correlating, when I move, it makes me feel better and function better. So we want to see it as a positive. And so, we're going to use our muscles to turn on your brain. So why don't you go do something a little bit active before we sit down to try to study and focus. And then I really want to be mindful of what their attention window is for whatever the task is that they're doing. And so again, we want to set our kids up for success. And so if it's an hour-long assignment and their attention window is 15 minutes, that's not going to be successful. So then how can I support it? Are they independent the first 15 minutes and then I'm going to sit with them and help? Or are we going to do a break and come back to it? There's different ways to do that, but we need to, and our abilities can fluctuate from day to day. Just because I could do it yesterday, maybe today I'm stressed and I'm tired and I didn't eat well. And so my 15-minute window might be a 7-minute window today. So being mindful of their actual current abilities in the moment, we're going to meet them there and then support them through that.
And would you say that any of this, so we talked about what would you do for your kids, what would you do for yourself if you're feeling the same, right? I hit a wall at 3 o'clock, I'm exhausted, or it's the weekend and I've had a really stressful week. Should I lie down as a mom and prioritize lying down for a half hour? Or should I be moving my body, or both? What is like best to kind of reset and rejuvenate and like bring your brain back to where it needs to be so that you can be present?
Yeah, exercise is one of the most powerful things. And we all have to find what works for us. For me, a nap is not a good scenario. I can't do, my husband can take a 20-minute nap. He's like, I'm going to go lie down, and he wakes up and he's like refreshed and energized. I can't. My brain doesn't stop to sleep. And if I do fall asleep, I sleep hard for 2 hours and then I am cranky the rest of the day. I'm just groggy and so nobody likes for me to nap. But for me personally, being outside and moving is what can just reset my mood and energy. And I try to be mindful of, I really enjoy podcasts, and I hit a point where I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I realized I wasn't giving myself downtime, quiet time in my own head. And that quiet time in our own head is when we process life. And so if I'm, tired, I've hit a wall, maybe I'm frustrated, maybe I'm stressed, any of the things that can happen on any given day, going for a walk outside. And I find oftentimes once I get there, I'm like, oh, I'll be done faster if I just run. And I know if I run, I feel even better. But I always tell myself it doesn't have to be a run every time. Just getting out there and moving is better than not. But I do walk or run just about every morning. And I do listen to music during that time, but I'm not on the phone, I'm not doing podcasts, and that has been the best thing for my mental health, for just processing life and brainstorming and being creative, and problem solving, and being able to be present. It's tempting at 3 o'clock to grab a second cup of coffee, and I do that sometimes, but knowing what that does for our stress hormones and quality of sleep at night, I know that that's not a great strategy all the time. So my quick go-to whenever possible is outside movement. But it doesn't have to be outside. Again, you can grab a jump rope, you can do burpees. My kids get embarrassed because I'll do squats or lunges just randomly just to wake up my brain. So it's finding what works for you, but it's understanding the strategy behind it. When we contract a muscle, it releases hormones that help. When we elevate our heart rate, it elevates attention and memory. When we engage our core muscles, it engages alertness in the brain. So it's what's your goal, and then what can I do to achieve that goal?
So what is that sweet spot for timing, for amount of time? If you're pressed for time, or you're having a hard time prioritizing yourself, or if you're pressed for time even with your kids, what is kind of that sweet spot for everybody to be moving to get that brain reset feeling?
It's a difficult answer because it depends on what the goal is. So in order to release endorphins, to really have like an elevation, a big elevation of mood, you need to elevate the heart rate sustained for 30 minutes. So that, if I'm really dragging, I know I need that endorphin boost, and that's a longer run. But it depends on 3 to 5 minutes of elevating the heart rate can activate attention and memory. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be complex, and it works for every age and every stage of the brain. Then core muscles, again, if I'm dragging, just making sure that I'm sitting up straight and engaging my muscles, or taking a minute and doing something as silly as a plank, engaging your muscles has an instant effect on the brain. And so do I need to stand up for a couple minutes? If I've got a big presentation or I'm stuck writing, I will stand up and work for a little bit just to elevate that. And, I want to apply this to our kids as well. We often have such a sit still to pay attention mentality with our kids. And that might be true for us because our brain is constantly trying to conserve resources. This is part of resilience, is my brain and body wants to use as few resources as possible so that I can sustain the thing I'm doing for longer. So the brain is amazing in the design that way. But when I run out of fuel and resources, then I'm going to have a harder time doing what I'm doing. And so we want to tap back into those resources and reset things. And I just lost my train of thought of where I started to where I'm going. I distracted myself with resilience. So I was like, oh, that's a whole other topic to talk about.
It is, but no, that's what I was getting at is, what should we be doing when we're pressed for time? Because we all are, no matter where you are in your stage of life, if you have kids or not, no matter how many kids you have, everyone is pressed for time. So just trying to figure out.
The quick, easy things with kids, if you've got a trampoline in the backyard, use it. If you don't, jump inside, and you can be silly and playful and fun and, make a ridiculous adventure thing in the house of we're going to hop on one foot down the hall, or we're going to run up and down the stairs, or we're going to do somersaults down the hallway. Those pieces are great. And for tons of more ideas, the book, it was mentioned at the very beginning, the book I wrote, Back on Track, A Practical Guide to Help Kids of All Ages Thrive is available on Amazon. And the whole book is filled with what are actionable things, tips and tricks for all ages that you can do at home. And it's based on the concepts of brain balance. At Brain Balance, we have such a deep understanding of what drives development, what drives brain health, what can we do to optimize and sustain function. And so it's putting those same core concepts into actionable tips at home to complement.
Well, awesome. Let's talk next about our favorite topic, which is nutrition and fuel, as you say. So, again, why don't we talk through why is fuel important to brain health?
It's what our body uses to function. And as parents, fuel is hard. I said we have 2 kids. I said years ago I would have had more if feeding them wasn't so much work. It's, they're opinionated, and I'll never make soup for my family again because so much work and then nobody eats it. And I'm like, oh, it's not worth it. So first I have to acknowledge that feeding kids and families well, when you are on a budget and pressed for time and you put in all the work and nobody eats it. So it's hard, but it's also something to value and prioritize, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's always each year, what can I do a little bit better? Trying to make sure that we're hydrating enough, trying to make sure that we've got a greater variety of vegetables. But what we eat matters. If we're doing high amounts of added sugars, it's going to peak energy and then crash. And what happens with attention and cognition along with that is we lose focus and attention when energy is peak, and we lose focus and attention when energy crashes. So I always think about, what am I doing to set my kids up for success in the school day? So if I've got a kiddo that has a hard time staying on task and focusing in school, a sugary breakfast is not going to help set them up for success. They need protein, carbohydrates, healthy fats, the things that are slow burn, that sustain, that are skipping those peaks and valleys, so that whatever their attentional curve and window is, it's going to optimize it rather than put it into a catalyst into kicking it out of those healthy ranges. FDA just came out yesterday with the announcement that they're banning red food dye, which is such an important step in moving in the right direction. Red food dye causes reaction and inflammation in nearly everybody, and that's for those of us that don't have a reaction to it. There's those that do, and then it's really problematic. So food dyes aren't going to cause ADHD, but it can exacerbate symptoms in all of us, whether we have ADHD or developmental condition or not. So the quality of our food really matters. The more highly processed something is, the harder it is for our body to break it down. And ultimately, our body's breaking it down to pull nutrients from it so that we've got the gas to go. And so if I'm eating a store-bought monster cookie that could sit on the shelf for 3 years and never go moldy and never go bad, it means there's a lot of other things added to that food. So as my body's breaking it down, there's not a lot of goodness there that it's pulling from when it's broken down. So there's not the healthy fats and the protein, and there'd be some carbohydrates. So, but I don't want to make food good and bad. We want to have healthy relationships with the food and to be able to enjoy ourselves. And so we try to have a fuel first mentality of, we had brownies last night after dinner. I absolutely love King George's gluten-free brownies. I think they're like better than any brownie. So, sweets and treats are okay. It's not that they're a bad thing, but we're going to fuel first. And so first we had dinner that we had, grilled a protein, and we had a salad and some rice, and then we were able to enjoy the brownies. So, and I know all of this is easier said than done when it comes to kids. Like you mentioned earlier, it's take small steps, and if they don't eat it, that's okay. Put it on their plate every night in small amounts. They will, over time, the more we're exposed to something, the more familiar and comfortable we get with it. And oftentimes they're picky eaters. That can be really tied to development. So their experience of taste and texture and smell might be different, and they might be processing things at a different level. And so what we see is when we mature development, we mature how the brain processes and integrates that information. And the more mature brain is more fluid and flexible, so more willing to try new things. And so we see at Brain Balance all the time that when we mature development, we see a evolving of those limited food choices.
For sure. And I think that all these things are tied together, as we know. And I think that there's, what are you able to do with your immediate family, and what is a small step for you versus, what is ideal. And I think that we always want to make sure that we meet families where they are for what they're dealing with. We know that a lot of families who attend and parents that attend these webinars have picky eaters in their family, or maybe a picky eater themselves, or have gone through the whole food intolerance gamut of identifying foods that may be affecting your child. But what I really want to ask you is, put you on the spot a little bit and ask you, what did Rebecca eat today? With the knowledge that everybody comes to nutrition with, picky eating again, and sensitivities to foods, or maybe like abilities and budget. What did Rebecca eat today for brain health, knowing that we had this webinar? And knowing that you have a very packed schedule, back-to-back meetings usually, and lots to do.
Yeah. So my morning routine every morning is I wake up, I make a cup of coffee. I do, coffee is new to me. I only started drinking coffee a couple of years ago. And so I require a fair amount of creamer in it. So I do a nut pod creamer in it. So I wake up every morning, I take a few minutes, I start my day on the computer for work. Maybe not the best thing for brain health, but it's how, for me, that time, that window from like 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, but my kids are older, so they're able to get themselves up and out the door. So it's, even though they're up and going, it is a quiet, calm time. We don't have meetings and things yet, so sometimes that's my favorite stretch. So I sip my coffee, I wake up, I do a little bit of work, and then I go for a run. And it's been really cold, and I'm really looking for it. But to me, outside and movement is key. And then when I get home from that, I do a protein shake every morning. It's coconut milk or almond milk, whatever I have in the fridge. And then it's just a simple collagen protein powder. I add spinach and avocado and banana. So I try to have that combination of some carbohydrate, some good fat. I add in a spinach wherever I can, just for it's a more absorbable form of calcium than some other things. So that was my breakfast, and then I worked a bunch, and then I did a ham sandwich for lunch. I grilled it to melt the cheese. My son and I are gluten-free, so it was a gluten-free ham and cheese sandwich. And then I took a couple of quiet minutes to myself before starting this, just I would have walked outside, but it was cold and I wasn't in the mood to bundle up. But to try to center my thoughts, to be able to focus. I always have so many things that I want to share and talk about, so to try to think about what are some of the most important things to share. So that was what I ate and what I did leading up till this moment here.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Here, I have one more like rapid fire nutrition question, which I think is super relatable. We talk a lot in our relationship. We've talked so much about in child rearing, but also for ourselves, like what do we have in the house versus what can we access outside, and what can we control versus what we might not be able to control, right? That's once your kids go to school, and also when you're on the run or out, it's much more difficult to control the fuel that you choose. And we talked about this a lot over the years in these webinars. You brought up instances of school get-togethers, or going to a hockey tournament and everyone goes into a convenience store to get food. And so I kind of want to just ask you this question of, when parents have to make a choice and you're outside of the home and it's outside of your controlled environment, this happens to me often, and say you go to like a convenience store, or there's like a snack bar moment, or a school treat moment, what is it that you would advise your kids to eat? And we can talk about teenagers, and I can talk about what choices I make too.
Can I make it, the older the kids have gotten, the harder it's been. When they're little, they eat what you put in front of them, and maybe they like it, maybe they don't. I now have one child with a driver's license, and so where they go, and she's got a job and money, and so those choices change. but the message is kind of what are you getting out of it? And not in a negative way, but you know, Drew, you've got a hockey game this afternoon. What have we done leading up to that? And so absolutely, if you want to get, you know, some candy at the convenience store, sure, let's save it for after the game. So how have you fueled leading up to the game so you can be the best version of yourself on the ice? We're getting ready. It's a bus road trip with the team to Jacksonville, Florida this weekend. And so tonight we're going to go to the grocery store so that we pick up, so we have with us, and this is where I struggle, is the organization and preparedness. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants, last minute, but we do best when we plan and organize. And so if I have along with us, we will do like a little charcuterie board for on the road. So it looks almost like a plastic tackle box. So I can have some cut up veggies, some nutcrackers, some hummus, and some meats and cheeses, just something quick that we can have available in the hotel room. So if we need just a little bit of something that we're fueling in a, you know, we're getting what the body needs. And then again, treats are okay. I'm not gonna say no, I don't want it to turn into a power struggle or a battle, but still fuel first and think about the timing of when you're doing the sugar, and if we can minimize some of the artificial food dyes and process things. My son being gluten-free, that naturally kind of takes out some of the like prepackaged muffins and some of those things a little bit more, but just because something's gluten-free does not mean that it is healthy. It can still be highly processed. So
Yeah, and I think also knowing your child, right? You know, like what affects one child, something might be off the spectrum for that child, where then your next child, or even you as yourself, one food that affects you may not affect a different family member, etc. So just
yep.
mindful of those choices before, you know, high performing moments like sports or big moment for socialization, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, we are at time, so we're going to run over a little bit just to take questions. And I think that our colleague is going to come on and perhaps read some of the questions to us, and we can take them for a few minutes.
Hi there.
Hi.
A couple questions. So the first one is sort of, you talked earlier about how sort of the understanding and discussion about brain health is relatively new. And I think for many folks, depending on when you were raised, our parents didn't have any understanding about this. And so, you know, one question is, you know, why is it that, you know, perhaps my child struggles with some of these things when I didn't? And if you can kind of give a perspective on that.
Yeah, you know, honestly, that's a conversation that we have so often at Brain Balance when it comes to food. You know, grandparents will say, "Well, I fed you this all the time and you were just fine. Why can't you have that now?" When it comes specifically to our food, there has been dramatic changes in agriculture over the last couple decades. So change in the quality of our soil, change in, we're doing a lot of genetic modification to our seeds and food. So there has been big changes in our food over the years. Gluten is a really good example of this, of, you know, gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity or reaction. Celiac wasn't as common years ago as it is today, but the wheat crops that are being grown today have been genetically modified to be more resistant to climate change and, or, you know, to the weather, to bugs. And so it's a harder shell that's very hard for our body to digest. And so bread made with wheat today is not the same as bread made with wheat 30 years ago. And so, and our bodies don't change as fast as those food sources. There's a really interesting TED Talk and tons of research and articles and information on changes in agriculture that has changed the foods that we're eating. And so, and I always love, you know, sometimes with my own parents, me telling them something isn't as powerful as me sending an article saying, "Hey, I thought this was super interesting. You might find this interesting to read as well." And so I love just starting with an article, and it doesn't have to be a research paper, but just a great article, having them read it, and then saying, you know, let me know after you've read it. I'd love to chat with you about it. So sometimes that can be a helpful way to bring awareness.
Great, thank you. Another question about sleep. Do you have any perspective on melatonin?
Yeah, so melatonin is, it cycles with the day. Our body naturally produces it, and melatonin helps to signal for our body to rest and sleep. So there's some pros and cons. So taking melatonin can help falling asleep at night, but there can be some concern around when you take melatonin that your body may stop the production or produce less melatonin. So from my perspective, from what I've read, it's not a bad thing to take from time to time. I don't think it's ideal to take it all the time, but if melatonin is helping, then that tells me that we've got to look at what are other ways that we can influence or impact the melatonin production and cycle in our body. And one of the ways that we can do that is natural light first thing in the morning. So our body goes in cycles, so sleep and wake. And so if you have the opportunity for you or your child, whoever is struggling with the sleep, to get outside and get that fresh natural light first thing in the morning, then it's going to trigger the timing of when melatonin is produced later in the day. If getting outside, if you know, maybe you live in Alaska and it's dark all the time and you don't have light first thing in the morning, you can get special light bulbs to put in a lamp. So you can order it inexpensively on Amazon. You can stick it in whatever lamp you have in your home. And so spending some time first thing in the morning with that blue light from the lamp, just spending a half hour. So if you, with a child, I would say, you know, when you wake up in the morning, turn on the light and enjoy reading and playing in your room for a half hour before coming out. Another thing that can help reset melatonin production is a spike of exercise first thing in the morning. So I'll give the example for you first is right when you wake up, and this is not wake up and lay in bed for 40 minutes and then get up, but right when you wake up, spiking that heart rate for 3 to 5 minutes. So something as simple as doing burpees or push-ups or keeping a jump rope right by your bed. You want to do that daily for about 2 weeks, because that's signaling to your body, I woke up and now I'm awake. So it's like, I'm super awake, I'm out of breath. And then that is signaling to your body then in the reverse when it's sleep time. A couple other things to keep in mind for the end of the day is caffeine and sugar. So caffeine, half-life for caffeine in an adult is often 6 hours. So that's how much time it takes for your body to break it down. And that varies. That's not a hard, fast rule. Everybody's body metabolizes that differently. I tend to have a longer half-life than others, so caffeine hits me harder. So being mindful of how late in the day you're having caffeine. And then if we're talking about a child, how late in the day we're having sugar. Again, and to take your body anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to metabolize that sugar. And so sugar is going to elevate heart rate. So I would be blue light first thing in the morning, a burst of exercise first thing in the morning, and then eliminating caffeine and sugar in the hours leading up to bedtime can help to naturally reset those cycling of the hormones that help us with sleep and wakefulness.
Thank you. Another sleep question. Ashley's working with her oldest son to get him to sleep at a reasonable time, but he tends to rev up at night. He tends to let's see, with anxiety, and sometimes it takes him hours to go to sleep ever since he was little. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we can easily overlook with anxiety is oftentimes when anxiety is present, there can be differences in sensory processing. So there can be disruptions in sensory. And so it can be really helpful for some calming sensory input. And then we also want to think about, so if we know that exercise wakes the brain up, we don't want to do that before bedtime. And so this would be a child that, you know, if you can do some exercise, you know, depending on what time school starts, if you can go for a walk around the neighborhood or bike ride or do some exercise first thing in the morning, again, we want to signal to the brain, use that energy now so that the body and brain is more tired at the end of the day. And definitely going to remove technology at the end of the day. Where a tired brain is going to lose control even more. And so think about yourself for your mood and emotions. Is if I'm stressed and I'm exhausted, that exhaustion is going to exacerbate that stress and I'm going to have less control over my reaction. So overtired is going to factor into that and make things even more exacerbated. So a nice calming nighttime routine might be take a warm bath and relax in the tub for a little while at bedtime. Maybe you quietly sit together and you read, and then doing a back massage, doing joint pressure. So doing where you're just putting pressure and then lightly pulling, and you can do that on the shoulder, the arms, the legs. You're giving some deep sensory stimulation input, but in a way that's still calming and relaxing. A heavy weighted blanket can be calming, so you're providing the sensory input that can help ground the brain. And then again, we want the brain to be tired but not overtired for that control.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's take one more. Becky's asking about how maybe to get off the night light. What is the, do night lights help? Do they hurt? And how might you get them out of the room?
Yeah, light in the room does have an impact on quality of sleep. But I'm also going to say, we kind of also have to balance this. And so if you need to be able to wake up and see, so a night light isn't the worst thing in the world. So if you've got a child that's getting good sleep and great mood and energy the next day, then that wouldn't be the thing that I really focus on or worry about. And then you can also just, if sleep has been an issue and you're struggling with mood and emotional regulation, and you want to improve the quality of sleep, then I would do a gradual in terms of, switching from a night light to having a hall light on and the bedroom door cracked, and then gradually over time having less and less of that. And then you could switch from the hall light on to a night light in the hallway, so that you're gradually over time just reducing that amount of light.
Okay, great. Thanks for taking some questions.
Thanks, Karen.
Victoria?
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rebecca. This conversation has been so insightful, and I wish we could talk forever. I'm so happy that this is our job today. It's just such a joy for me, and I hope that everybody who joined today has gained some insights from Rebecca and her time, her research, and her time thinking about this and diving into it and kind of living the life of optimizing brain health and making these choices daily. I really appreciate everyone's time and joining us today. Rebecca's book is called Back on Track, and you can get it at Amazon, and she really does a deep dive. It's such a nice resource for families, for kids of any age, to just really help kids, teens, adults thrive in life by optimizing and committing to changes for brain health. So thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate you. Everybody, I'm just going to really quick plug our next webinar, if you have a second. We're going to be off for the month of February and come back to you in March, on March 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be welcoming Dr. Jacques Jospitri, I hope I said it correctly, who's a board certified psychiatrist, and he's the founder of Soho MD, which is something super interesting to us and very exciting and right up our alley, an integrative psychiatry practice. And we're going to be talking about the connection between mental health, mental wellness, and nutrition. And this is just going to be such an insightful conversation. March is National Nutrition Month. Nutrition is something that's so important to us at Brain Balance, and part of our program and how we advise parents is to make mindful choices for nutrition. And like we talked about today, identifying foods that affect brain health. And Dr. Jacques Jospitri is going to be talking to us about, how we can optimize our mental health. What are the nutrients and types of nutrition that affect mental health? And it's a perspective of this integrative psychiatry in helping individuals achieve better mental health. So we hope you'll join us on March 20th. You can scan the QR code and register. We will be sending out the recorded version of this webinar so you can watch it anytime on demand tomorrow morning. And we really appreciate all of you for following along with us in these Parents Know webinars. I'm Victoria Jacobetti, our brand manager, and we will see you in March. Thank you.